Well, look who it is. I don't hear any audio on you. Can you hear me, Jensen?
Oh, I got you loud and clear, big guy.
There we go. Well, welcome to Talktoberfest. I am not who you thought was going to be here, but I got called out of the bullpen at last minute, and so here we are. It's Jensen and Bo night. Who knows what we're about to do?
I know. I'm looking forward to this. I know we do radio together all the time, but this is the first time we've done this, and this is sort of like when you and I get together to go to lunch, and who knows what we're going to talk about. That's what I feel like this is like. This is going to be like.
Well, for those of you who don't know, we do lunch. We try to do it every few months or so, just to
Yeah.
kind of take stock and see how things are going. Brett's got his ear to the ground. I've got my ear to the ground. If we're on the same wavelength, then we're doing all right, right?
I think we're doing good. We're good.
So remember, this is brought to you by Dry Otter Waterproofing tonight, Talktoberfest. It was supposed to be Scott Hamilton, but Hamilton, as I understand, is not feeling too well. So our program director called me and said, would you be interested in doing the show with Jensen tonight? And I said, no way, no how. And then he called me 3 or 4 more times, and I finally said yes, and so here I am.
Yeah, and it's something like he agreed to pay you like $500 extra or something like that, like because they couldn't find any takers. And so you were the loser that wound up taking it. Yep.
No, I was trying to remember. Have we done one of these before? Like, I feel like somewhere along the way we must have been not like just the two of us, but we've been on the same one before, haven't we?
So Garrison and I have done it twice, and me and Winnable did it once, but you and Winnable did it once, and I just sort of came in and joined later on. So it was you two. I think it was not last year. It was 2 years ago. The first year we did it, and I joined you guys like midway through the stream or something like that, just as an add-on.
So where are you? You're on the roof. You got the city in the background, the South Park area, the South Park studio.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see the skyline at all? Can you
Yeah,
see it?
yeah, I can. That's pretty cool.
Yep. So I'm on the rooftop. Yep.
Well, I'm in my basement studio hideout bungalow, and yeah, I got the Jaws poster in the background, and I don't have the city skyline, but I have this drawing, this rendering of Charlotte, which was done. It was done for WBT and WBTV back when we were owned by Jefferson Pilot in the late. I want to say it's about circa like 1980, but I remember I used to see it as a kid. It was a big collage of the city, and James K. Flynn, who some of you may know, was a morning man at BT for a long time, and about 4 or 5 years ago, he cleaned out his attic and brought a bunch of stuff and said, "Do you want any of this stuff?" And he had this thing rolled up. I always get questions about what is that and where did it come from. It's actually like a drawn rendering of Charlotte circa 1980. So that's what that is in the background. Not as cool as the live skyline, but it's the closest thing I can get to it.
I had something very similar to that, except it was Carowinds. I had the Carowinds poster of that rendering because I think it was the same person or whatever.
Yeah,
and they did it for Carowinds around 1980, and I had the drawing of Carowinds.
It is the same thing because I've got a book. It's a Charlotte historical book. You can get they have a section in Barnes and Noble where they have those Charlotte history books, and one of them is all Carowinds. And somebody put it together, and it's got the park map from the first maybe 15, 20 years. And you're exactly right. Now that I think about it, I can't zoom in on this, but the little drawings on that collage are exactly like the ones from Carowinds. I bet it is the same person. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it has to be. So yeah, I had one of those when I was a kid. Absolutely.
So hello to Lily and Tracy and Matt Tollison. What's up, Matt Tollison, father of the legend or son of the legend, Ron Tollison. We got Bobby Gray. We got is it Diva or Deva? Says hey Bo and Brett. Ann Wright says Phyllis and Maggie update.
Maggie update. So Maggie, my 14-and-a-half-year-old golden retriever, exactly 1 month or 1 year ago this month, she was misdiagnosed with kidney disease. They put her on all kind of kidney medicine. It jacked her up. And I was just trying to figure out, they actually basically said, it's time to think about Maggie's quality of life, basically like a hospice situation. So I just started looking around, and I went to a vet that was closest to me, Cotswold Animal Hospital, which is where Bo also happened to go, and I didn't know that. Went there for a second opinion. On the first visit, they said your dog does not have kidney disease, and here we are, exactly 12 months later, after they were telling me to prepare for her demise and death and everything else. The first place, the only thing with Mags right now is like she's having issues eating, and what I mean by that is she just doesn't want to eat. So I have to give her medicine sometimes to make her want to eat. And so, like, I've spent several hundreds of dollars, close to $1,000 probably since June, on different types of dog food, just trying to find something she'll eat. And then for a while, she would eat boiled chicken breasts. So I bought a lot of boiled chicken breasts. Then she decided she didn't want that anymore. Then she was eating boiled ground beef. Well, ground beef is $3.99 a pound. And when you boil it down, it's about 2/3 of a pound, and they have to eat at least a pound of beef a day. So I was spending like $7 a day just on ground beef for Mags to eat. And then finally, we're rearing towards something else. And I don't know if we're out of the woods, right? I'm sure we're not. But she's, other than her eating habits, Maggie is 14 and a half years old and 3 years has lived 3 years longer than the average golden retriever. And she's still fine as long as we can just get her to eat. So,
It's you mentioned how old she is. I just actually sent this story to Beth earlier, but the oldest dog in the world, you see this, just unfortunately passed away this week, but the oldest dog in the world, oldest ever. How old do you think how old do you think the oldest dog was?
22.
31.
There you go. And was it a very small dog?
Let's see. What was it?
Small dogs live for a very long time. It's the larger breeds that generally live 9 to 12, 13 years. And it's the small dogs like that can go 15, 18, 20 years, like cats.
Portuguese Mastiff, it says.
Well, that's a big dog.
Yeah. So anyway, let's see. We got a few more people. It's Deva. Deva with the E is short. So hi, Deva. Thanks for being here. David's here. Cassidy Hooper's in the house. Cassidy, always good to see you and hear you. Jim says, hey, Bo and Brett. Ken says, surprised to see Brett on here. Heard he joined the Live Tour on the Range Goats team. Chris and Jim. Well, I have to be honest with you. I was sitting there talking to Bernie, and I was wondering if you were going to do the thing you do on Tuesdays, where we had to play the Ramones, so you can kind of waltz in right at last minute, and that would actually be on brand, wouldn't it?
I joined at 6:58. We're okay.
You did. You were early, actually. So this is like you're right though, because Brett's in the studio with us tomorrow on the show with Beth and me on Good Morning BT. And but you and I go way back, sort of doing this. So it's just we do it, but there aren't cameras there. But I feel like you and I don't go too far without. It's not always lunch, but it's checking in, just sort of comparing notes, right, and just getting the lay of the land. So
yeah, I mean, I've told this story, quite a few times, but you knew me when I was a sports guy, and you were a producer at WCCB for The Edge. And I wound up doing The Edge. And the very first time I did The Edge was the night that Cam Newton won the national championship and beat Oregon. And so that was the first time I ever did The Edge. And that would have been 2011, January of 2011.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is The Edge didn't start till 12:30 at night because that's when WCCB was still Fox, and we didn't start till 12:30 at night. I'm like, that's great. I got all the third shift workers getting ready to watch me. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So you guys, let's see. We got Jethro has joined. Ken has joined. Ken's the one that was talking about Live Golf. If you guys have questions, fire away. We'll be sure to answer them. Matt Tollison says, Bo, what time are you up and Adam each morning? That would be 3 a.m. sharp. If I hit snooze, maybe 3:08, 3:09, but 3 a.m. is I've been doing this for almost 12 years now. And so the first few years, you have to kind of figure out what your sweet spot is for when you wake up and get ready. And what I found out was when I first got the job, I was doing the get up at 4, and that didn't leave me enough time because there were a couple of stories where it completely turned upside down after I went to bed. Like the Boston bombing was one I remember very specifically in 2014, I believe, where I thought I knew what I was talking about the next morning, and then I went to bed and got up at my then normal time, which actually was probably like about 3:45 at that point, and the story had completely changed. So I had to start over. So I sort of built in another hour where I come downstairs and prep in my basement down here. And so I get up at 3, I leave the house. Honestly, I leave the house at 4:30 because there's no traffic in Charlotte at that time. So I don't have to worry about, I live on the other side of town from the station. If I drove there in the middle of the day, it'd take me 30 minutes sometimes or more than that if there's bad traffic. But in the middle of the night, there's nobody but me. So that's one of the perks if you're willing to get up that early. But so I don't get to the station until about 4:45. But, there have been hosts that preceded me that would get to work, and that's starting for the day. Whereas I do all my prep at home. So, when I step out of the car I'm ready. I could start the show then and there. So that's kind of how I go.
True story. Whenever I fill in for Bo Thompson on the morning show, which has been many times over the last 5 years, a lot of times, whenever I fill in for Bo Thompson and the show starts at 5 a.m., true story, my alarm is set for 4:20 a.m. I hit snooze once. I just get up, throw on a hat, throw on a shirt, pair of jeans, and I'm out the door by 4:35, 4:40, walk into the studio, sit down, and go. There you go.
You're a better man than me.
I was like, no, because my whole thought is like, well, if something happens, I could do my show prep during the 5 o'clock hour. During the commercial breaks.
I mean, I am of the, and Beth knows this, and Beth has had to sort of, get to know me as we've gone on. But, I come in each day. I'm an audio guy. I'm a producer guy. So I do a lot of audio gathering here. I do a lot of times I'll do produced pieces and stuff that will be parts of what we do on the air. And like, for example, today, if you listen to Mick Mulvaney on Mondays, one of the things we do from time to time is we do a music trivia segment to end the final hour. And so this morning, I spent probably 20, 30 minutes editing down songs, one of which by the Rolling Stones came out on Friday and has F-bombs all over it. Oh. So I had to edit those out, right? But, when we do music trivia, we rattle off 5 songs in a row usually, but a lot of times those songs are queued up to certain points and they're edited in a way that I can load them into my computer and then I can fire them off one by one, because I fire almost all my own audio from during the show. John Moore and I sort of work in concert together, but when it comes to something like that I've edited, in that case, I was firing it out of my machine. I say fire, I mean, play. But, so I spend a lot of time at night and in the early morning gathering story ideas that Beth and I will talk about, but I do a lot of production too, because that's just how I'm wired. So that's why everybody's got their different way. Al Gardner before me used to get to work at about 4 o'clock, and then he would sit down and he would, in the old days before the internet, he would go through newspapers like the Wall Street Journal and the Charlotte Observer, and he would tear out little, he called them kicker stories. And he would assemble all those around him. And our producer used to have to go and find things in the newspaper and tear them into little pieces for him. But to each their own, technology's caught up a long way. But so when I say the original question is when I get up and why do I get up that early? And, I'm glad somebody asked how you prepare, because everybody prepares differently. Like I know when you come in to do my show or our show, Beth's in my show, you have a way of doing it. And to be quite honest with you, when I take time off, I don't care how the other person does it. I care that they do it so that I can be off. So,
well, and that's the thing. It's like, and I know you and Beth like have fun, and there is a lot of truth that people need to understand that if we're going on air, if Bo's going on air at 9:05, technically, there are a lot of times I'm walking in at 9:04, 9:04:30, 9:03:30. That's true. But I do that for my own show. I've done that for as long as I've been on radio because I like to walk in, not think about it, sit down and just go. And that's the way I like to do it. Like a lot of people like to get there early, as I know Winterbowl will get there sometimes an hour early, 30 minutes early, and just get things together. I don't want to bombard my brain with too much stuff, so I just sit down and just go. And that's just the way I've always been. And even back in the WFNZ days, Colin Hoggart, who's a producer over there at WFNZ, he can tell you. I mean, for a 10 a.m. show, I'm walking in at 9:59. Like, let's go. And
Right.
they said, well, Brett, what happens if there's a car wreck? Well, I have it all planned out. So if I hit every single stoplight, I still know how long it takes me to get there. And now, and if there's a car wreck or whatever, well, then there's nothing you can do because you could be leaving for work early. Give yourself 15 minutes grace. And if you get in a car wreck or there's a car wreck in front of you, sometimes things just happen, no matter what time you leave. So I just like to sit and go and not think about everything. I have my little notes and just go. So that's why everyone does it differently.
Well, and I said a few minutes ago, I don't care as long as the person does the show. That's sort of tongue in cheek because obviously I've been doing the show for a long time. I take it a lot of pride and take it very seriously, that morning shift, but there are a handful of people, and only a handful of people, that doing that show, as Brett will tell you, is a different ball game than doing really any other shift in the station. And I don't mean that I can waltz in and do Brett Winterble's show, or I can waltz in and do Pete Callender's show. I can't. But the morning clock is different. It's a different animal, and not everybody wants to do that. It's the longest show at the station, so not everybody is willing to do it. So there are only a handful of people that have come along that kind of fall in all those categories. Brett's one of them. Over the years, Mark Garrison has done it. Jim Zoki used to do it. And so, I mean, we have a handful of people, but I'm comfortable with all of those people, and so is Beth. Beth and I usually take the same time off because we like to kind of get recharged at the same time and come back and ready to roll. But Brett, I remember the first time I ever heard you, and it was filling in for Mark Packer on FNZ back in the primetime days. That's another show, primetime. If you used to listen to them in the afternoon, it's a very, very sort of unique and a type of show that not anybody can just walk in and do. I mean, Mark Packer did a very, very stylized, very nuanced, kind of eclectic show. The very first time I ever heard you, had never had any idea that we'd ever know each other or work together, but you filled in for Packer. And there were a handful of people who used to do that, kind of like our morning show. And you basically you'd been a guest on his show. You've been one of the panelists, and you had, I guess, studied him and sort of, it had, through osmosis, I guess, kind of absorbed his sort of nuances and his inflection. I mean, you did the show when he was out like you were him. And it was uncanny how similar it was. But I remember when I heard you do that, I thought, okay, this dude's got a different set of gears that I didn't know he had.
So I was, like you said, a panelist for many years, or for a few years, and they approached me. Daniel Norwood was their old producer. He's now at Sirius XM.
Yeah, I know Daniel.
Yeah, and he asked me, he said, hey, we'd like you to host. And I'd never hosted a radio show in my entire life. I was always the guy asked the questions to, sort of like what I do with you guys on Tuesdays from 9 to 10. Like, you're asking me the questions and I can pontificate on whatever the sports topic was. And they said, do you want to host? And I was like, sure. I was so scared. So what I did was the night before, two days before, I recorded Packer. And I typed out verbatim his entire opening spiel, going into breaks, out of breaks, starting the show, starting each hour. And I just literally read every single thing, like read the script. And about 2 or 3 days later, Norwood came up to me and he's like, Brett, he goes, don't try and be Mark. I said, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to do this. He goes, just be yourself. And by the way, I hate that term because they always used to say, well, just be yourself. I don't know what myself is. And when you say that to people, like, what do you mean be myself? I don't, just be yourself. Like, what? Nobody knows what that means. No one could ever explain that to me. And so I was like, all right, well, this is probably going to be a disaster if you want me to be myself, but okay. But at least I figured out by typing out everything that he had said, at least I figured out how to go into breaks and how to do that and come out of breaks. So at the very least, I learned what you were supposed to say, but not try and pull a Rich Little and imitate him, which is what I was doing. I had the voice inflection and everything.
Well, everything. A lot of time you did, and it was. Look, I will tell you, it was very impressive. I was impressed because I worked in the mornings back then. I started out working with Al, and then I moved to Larson for a couple of years, and I've been as a producer. I'm talking about, but when I actually got to hear other radio stations, it was only midday into the afternoons. I used to listen to FNZ a lot, and I listened to Primetime. I listened to Packer. I've never met Packer, but I've met Norwood, and I met a lot of the guys, including you and Spanberg, and a lot of people used to be on that show. And I remember thinking, not only, I mean, you were obviously trying to mimic what he was doing, but you did it, and it's not easy. I remember listening to the Weiner line. You go, next one, please. Next one, please. That's like, that is. So anyway, but the thing about it is you did what you had to do then, and then you got an opportunity. I'm sure, and I didn't work at that station, and we didn't own them then, so this is a different time. But they obviously saw you had the chops, and you took enough care in to learn that, and then you got your own show, and then you did exactly what you just said. You developed your own style, and that's how it that's how it works, or that's how it should work. But let me see here. We've been talking, and I've lost track of some of the comments here. I said Jethro says hello from the gas house. I told Matt asked about what time I get up. So here's Kenny Smith. Kenny Smith wants to know if you're drinking scotch, Jensen. Bourbon. Okay. I forgot to grab something. I don't have anything. I may have to go.
You can go do that, and I can hold down the fort. Go grab me a nice highball. You'll be all right.
See that I have to go fix it though. Let's see. Ann says, Brett, has your mom had surgery yet? If so, how is she progressing?
She had surgery 1 week ago today, knee replacement surgery 1 week ago today, and she's sore, but most soon-to-be 78-year-old women would be sore. So, but non-78-year-old women would be sore. But yeah, so she's sore, but she's doing all right. She's getting around, and as I like to say, just a couple months of pain for the rest of your life of not having pain. And so it's very discomfortable, and you're going to be going, why did I do this? Well, just remember what it was like beforehand. And then in 2 or 3 months, you won't have any pain. You'll be walking around normally. So that's what I just try and tell her. So yeah, but then she's doing fine. But thank you for asking.
Jethro says, what time is a good bedtime? If all things are going well, 8 or 8:30 for me. If I'm going to, and I've said that time and time again, getting up is not the hard. Well, if I'm going to get up at 3 o'clock, that's a good time. Not on a Friday night. No, actually, I take that back. Friday night, I crash. I could go to bed at 6 o'clock on Friday if I had to. But on Saturday night, if I don't have to work the next day, I'm going to stay up later. But if I have to get up at 3 o'clock, ideally 8 or 8:30 is what I would shoot for. Although I have 2 kids and we got things going on in our family. So I'm not saying I say I probably 9:30 is when I probably average going to bed. Joe Panko says, that's why you have gray hair. I have gray hair because of Pat McCrory. It's very simple.
Well done. Well done.
Jim says he's been listening to BT every morning since he moved here in 1994. So if you moved here in 94, Jim, that means you were listening to John Robinson and Danny and Don Russell. That would be the first incarnation of Charlotte's Morning News. I was in college then. So that was my first stint kind of away for a few years. And then after that was Al Gardner started in 97. And somebody asked on here, what is it? What are your other responsibilities at BT other than being a host? Well, we can both answer that. I'll say my early years, I was a behind the scenes guy, and I was a producer and a writer, and I wasn't an assistant program director, but I did a lot of the things you would file under that category, although I didn't have that title. But it was a period of years where a lot of us pitched in behind the scenes. But I mean, I was a producer for 10 years, and I was a writer for 5 years. And then after that was Al Gardner started in 97. And somebody asked on here, what are your other responsibilities at BT other than being a host? Well, we can both answer that. I'll say my early years, I was a behind the scenes guy, and I was a producer and a writer, and I did a lot of the things you would file under that category, although I didn't have that title. But I started screening calls for Henry Bogan, and then my Jerry V back when I was in college, Jerry Klein. When I started here full time, it was Al Gardner when he was hired to do Charlotte's Morning News, and then Danny came along, and then Stacy came along, and then I worked with Larson, Keith Larson, for 2.5 years, and then I left, and I left and went to work for Danny's smaller station, and then I worked in TV for a few years. But that was sort of the delineation point between when I was behind the scenes and on the air, and now, I mean, Brett, you're the way right now we're both on the air. We both have shows, but we pitch in other places too. Like I'm pitching in tonight because Scott was sick, but I do a lot of production. I do a lot of station promos, and just, I'm a nuts and bolts guy, and that's how I came up. So I still help out with a lot of that, and I like to help out with a lot of that if that answers the question. So I'm seeing a lot of llamas on here. Every time I say Keith Larson, somebody says llama. So yeah.
I don't I mean, you guys pretty much know what I do. I mean, I'm a reporter. Can be on the shows throughout the day. I'm on Bo's a lot, even when I'm not on Tuesdays, a different day of things going on. I'll be on Bo's show, Winnable's show, Garrison, who used to have a show before he moved to the morning news anchor, Pete's show, I'll do Vince's show, whatever's happening, I can be on throughout the day, and then also do my show to give updates on something if there's like a pretty big story or whatever. And then other than that, just to be a burden on society. That's about it. That's my goal.
Well, and I know, like Beth and I talk about this a lot. Like I'm always, to one degree or another, on the job. I mean, as long as I've got my phone, every time I scroll through and I see a story that might be what we call a talker or something that we can do a segment on, I'll screenshot it or I'll bookmark it. Or actually, what I almost always do, and I'm kind of in a ever-present text chain with Beth, and we just send stories to each other. And if I send her a story, she knows that I'm cool to talk about it, and vice versa. And we have that sort of, like, at any one point in time in the show, if there's a lull or we don't know what we're going to talk about, we can both go to our phones and see 15 stories that we have agreed would be something we'd bring up on the air. And that's outside of when we schedule guests, or whether there's breaking news, or whether, like for tomorrow example, in the 10 o'clock hour or the 9 o'clock hour, Jensen's in there with us. So I always sort of make a point to know what you've been doing. And, if you've done an interview, I'll get a piece of audio from it. Or, it's a cross-promotional opportunity. It's two guys shooting the breeze opportunity. You throw Beth into that mix and you never know where it's going to go. And so
three guys.
I like the 9 o'clock hour with you, because my philosophy on it, and you and I have talked about this before, but you have the Brett Jensen that's on from 7 to 8 at night, and you have the Brett Jensen that is reporter. I like 9 to 10. I mean, we cover the obligatory stuff, but I always sort of think about 9 to 10 as a chance for you to sit back and sort of be part of our show and shoot the breeze. And if we're doing it right, I always feel like the best days that we have you are when we can sort of give you a window into a different side of you, or a different side of us. Because to me, that's what makes the station go round.
And whether we're talking about like my dating life as being the only single person at that station, or whatever, or what sports, or whatever the case may be, Maggie, whatever the case is, my philosophy has always been that I'm going to be brutally honest. And because we used to have a back in the day when I was at FNZ, they'd always try and come up with arguments or disagreements because, sports fans, you take Carolina, you take Duke, and argue against Roy Williams and Krzyzewski or whatever. And I said, I'm not going to do that, because I won't be able to keep up with how I'm supposed to feel. Or, if I don't feel that way, I'm just not, because I'll forget that something that I was supposed to have said or agreed with or disagreed with. So when I found out I was going to do radio full time, when they offered me a job at FNZ full time, I came up with a couple of rules, and I was going to go anti-sports rules. I was going to pull the Dan Patrick. and I noticed that there's which was completely anti WFNZ at the time. No yelling, no name calling, stuff like that. So I went, all right, I'm going to be like Dan Patrick. No name calling, no yelling. We can have discussions. You can disagree with me, whatever. But if you yell or call a name call like, oh my gosh, you're so stupid, you're a moron, I would just hit the dump button. And so no one would hear you. And your friends wouldn't hear you or anything else. And so that was rule number one. But rule number two was I was always going to be brutally honest. Now, what I may say may be dead wrong, may turn out to be dead wrong. But when I say it, I believe it to be true. And I got that. I was going to be open about my personal life a lot of times. And I got that from the movie Private Parts with Howard Stern. And Howard Stern was reality TV before reality TV. And there's that famous scene where he's talking about his wife, and they had the miscarriage, and his wife is with the realtors and a couple of other women, and they don't know that's her husband on the radio talking about having the miscarriage and everything. And she was upset, and he was like, honey, if we're going to do this, I have to bring them into my life. I want them to be a part of my life. They have to know what's going on and know that I'm not a phony, that we have good days and bad days. And I thought that's it. And so that's what I always, so whether I'm making jokes about my dating life or lack thereof or whatever, that's what I just figured, you know what, I'm just going to be honest about it and be open about it. And it was the Howard Stern Private Parts movie that made me feel that way. And he's been that way forever. And I thought, you know what, he's kind of successful, just a little successful. So I thought that was a good person to try and follow in terms of how he approached things. And so that's how I always approach things. So when I go in with you and you guys bring up some topic about music or dating or lifestyles or whatever the case may be, I love that stuff. I love getting into all that stuff.
This may be a surprise to some people, but I think Howard Stern is the greatest interviewer of all time.
He may be.
And that's not to say that there aren't some good ones out there, because there are plenty of them. But saying that doesn't mean that there aren't 20 other ones. But I was late to the game on Howard Stern, and I think part of it was because he was on Sirius Satellite for a while, and in the early days, I was not listening to. It's funny, the internet now, and I know Howard was syndicated at some point in his career.
Well, he was on 95.7 here forever and ever and ever. That's where you listen to Howard Stern, was 95.7.
On what then was, I mean, it's WXRC, but So I never knew he was. See, I did. To me, the internet changed so much, and now you can listen to any station in any town at the touch of a button. Right. But back in those days, I wasn't listening to that morning show in town, and I actually in the early days thought Howard Stern, what I knew of him was shock jock, not the kind of thing I was going for. And then about 15 years ago, we got a new car, or we rented a car. But you know how you can go and you can get those. And look, we're on terrestrial radio, and some people may say, "Why are you talking about Sirius?" Look, to me, it's all audio. It's all different forms, and you can learn things from everybody. And so anyway, we rented a car. We got a new car, and it had one of those trials for Sirius. And I listened to Howard for the first time, and then I started realizing some of the people that he interviewed, which incredible celebrity, high-power interviews from all walks of life, sports, you name it, politics. I mean, he gets almost everybody. And what I realized was, once you wade through some of the crass stuff, because that's not my cup of tea, but the interviews that he does, I've listened to so many interviews with him over the years, just listening to how he sort of gets answers out of people that are off the beaten path. We can name 5 or 6 people, very famous political figures or celebrities or whatever you want, sports figures, and you could have them be interviewed by the same 5 people. I mean, not the same, but 5 different people, but you get generally the same questions and answers. And Stern can probe, and part of it, he has an advantage that he's on satellite and he doesn't have some of the constraints that we have, but that's not an excuse for me or you. It's Howard has been doing this for so long, and he has the connections, and he digs and he gets answers out of people. And so I've incorporated a lot of what he does into what I do as far as interviewing people. Now, there's a point where we deviate with some of the stuff he does and the kind of radio we do, but I believe you can learn from everybody. and I always tell, I've spoken for 3 years up at Appalachian State to the Keller group, and talking to students who want to get into this business. And I always say, listen, you will meet all kinds of people on your way up the ladder, and you will see examples of people who are doing it the right way and people who are doing it the wrong way. People that are partly your cup of tea and partly that aren't, but take a little piece from everybody. And the things that are not your style or not what you want to be, discard those, but hang on to the nuggets. And then by the time you do this for a living, if you get to that point, then you sort of take all of that and ball it up and then put your stamp on it. And hopefully that equates to a successful media person. But, for the longest time, I thought Howard Stern was kind of this shock jock crass guy. And then I listened to his interviews and I like, man, doesn't matter always what you're saying. It's how you're getting answers out of people. And so anyway, I'm glad you brought up Howard Stern, because a lot of times in these sessions we get questions from people who are your inspirations and people that you have learned from. And Howard Stern is definitely one of those people that I've taken mental notes from and absolutely used some of the things in my career. Let's see. Let's get to some of these real quick. The Charlotte Observer, Ken says the Charlotte Observer actually quoted and gave attribution to Brett and WBT today on the Huntersville story. The end of days must be near.
Wonders never cease to exist. What do you know? They actually gave me credit and cited me for something. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it only took 5 years, but thank you.
Jethro says Jensen is always a great fill-in. He is. And that's why he has his own show now. Kenny Smith says, I did the 7 to 10 shift once. Very, very hard. The PM. Yep. Kenny is, Kenny and I were in high school together, for those of you who don't know. So Kenny's, Kenny and I reconnected after many years when Kenny was in to do a campaign commercial for a city council campaign, 10 years ago, maybe. I've lost count now. But then Kenny became an election analyst for us, and Kenny was on city council, and he became somebody that we had on a lot who, had his ear to the ground and always gave us great insight. So Kenny's become a really good friend over the years and has done some fill-in stuff and is very versatile and is much better at this than I think he ever realized he was. Kenny also says he loved Hello, Henry. Me too. I wouldn't be doing this without listening to Henry, and God rest his soul. He died in 2006. Jim Holland says Brett is Chernobyl radioactive. Are you asking if it's radioactive, or are you saying Brett is radioactive?
Oh, I think he's saying Brett is Chernobyl radioactive.
I think so too.
There's probably a lot of truth in that statement.
Jim says Howard Stern was king of media. He's just a shell now. Howard's in a different lane now, and Howard is, I think the pandemic sort of, Howard doesn't really go out of his house anymore, but he does his show still. And I listen from time to time. Let's see here. Daniel, hello. What's going on, Daniel? Susan wants a Maggie update. We did that. But for those of you who are just joining, Maggie's doing well, at least all things considered right now, right?
Yeah, she's doing fine. We got her on some medicine that will actually make her eat. For whatever reason, as dogs get old, really old, they just sometimes decide there's nothing they like. Like, they're hungry, they just don't like what's in their bowl, no matter what it is. And so we've got her on a little bit of medicine that I have to feed her, every other day, something like that, to actually make her eat. And when you do give it to her, it's like the Tasmanian devil. She can't stop eating, and she'll eat everything in sight. But that's a good thing. That's a good problem to have. So we're still doing our physical therapy. Maggie and I take her to physical therapy once a week, sometimes twice a week, where it's water physical therapy. Well, they'll fill up this giant tub that's like maybe 10 feet long, full of water up to her armpits on a treadmill, and she has to walk in the water resistance, but it's warm water to help her joints, and that way she gets her exercise on a treadmill in the water. So I take her to physical therapy once a week as well. Somebody
asked about my dog, Phyllis, a little miniature schnauzer that we got a couple of years ago. She's doing great. We actually took her to Cotswold Animal Hospital today for her checkup, and she's kind of annoyed because she got 3 shots in the rear end, but doctor said she's good. Debbie says, love Bo, Kenny, and Trisha on election night coverage. Always a great show. Trisha obviously is got a few bigger things going on these days, so we haven't had Trisha in on election night in a while now that she's back in office. But I know, Brett, you've got you talk to Trisha more than anybody, and we've had a couple of interviews with her. I mean, she has become, I didn't know Trisha. It turns out Trisha, when she was with us, was sort of on the island between between political runs, because she was one of the youngest ever to serve in the General Assembly. And I didn't know if she was done, but she seemed like she was sort of out of that for a while. And then I don't know, Brett, did you see her? Did you foresee her turning around and going back to the degree she's at right now?
No, not at the time, because she was like a political consultant, and she had a lot of big jobs and a lot of the big people in North Carolina. And she was doing that and exceptionally successful at it. And I remember when I found out that she was running, I was surprised, but not surprised, because
Yeah.
she loves politics and everyone knows who her mom is. And so, who gets the most votes every single year for county commissioners. And so, because Republicans and Democrats each like Pat Coughlin. And so I wasn't that surprised. But then people were shocked that she switched parties, and I wasn't at all. And the reason I wasn't shocked is because I knew what had been happening, even when she was running in the primary, and then when she was running in the general election. And I knew all the things that were coming at her like just tons of hate from the Democrats. And she was still a Democrat, running as a Democrat, trying to prevent a supermajority. And all this was happening while she was a Democrat. And she was a Democrat, and people were messaging her kids on Instagram, other liberal groups, saying, the people who didn't want that law about ICE, where sheriffs are now required by law to cooperate with ICE for 5 violent crimes. And they were reaching out to her kids, and it was just a really bad thing. And so, she had enough and said, well, if I'm not being protected by my own party, if I switch parties, because she was always more of a centrist anyway, she was never fully left and fully right. And so she said, well, if I switch parties, maybe I'll be protected. And she has been. And she became the most powerful woman in North Carolina without question, because she alone held all the veto votes and override veto votes. And so they did a poll not long ago, and the most famous politician in North Carolina was Roy Cooper, and just a few percentage points behind was Trisha Coughlin. And so now the big question is, everyone wants to know, is she going to run for Congress, or is she going to stay and try to, and run again for a House representative? And I can tell you, as God is my witness sitting here, I have no idea what she's going to do. Like, she and I haven't really discussed it. More recently, just in the last week or so, we've been discussing. She had major jaw surgery, and like really bad jaw surgery with screws and plates and everything else. And so, from something that happened when she was much younger, in around 20 or so. But I don't know what she's going to do. And they say, well, bro, what do you think she's going to do? I honestly don't know. I don't even have a guess at this point. If you held a gun to my head, I might think she'll stay running for the North Carolina House as opposed to running for Congress. But I mean, I have no idea. I truly don't. And, I know her obviously pretty well, thanks to Bo. Bo's the one who actually introduced her to me on election.
On the gateway, man.
On election night, you were the one that introduced me to her. We know, with her and Kenny Smith in the studio doing election night stuff. And so I honestly, I don't know. And I'm not just like trying to cover. I honestly, as on Maggie's life, I have no idea what she's going to do. No idea. And we haven't even talked about it.
Well, she's I enjoyed working with her. I knew her mom well before I knew her, and then I did not. We've gone through election night's been a sort of a evolution over the years, and now, I mean, Trisha's obviously doing her thing now, and I think she's where she wants to be. Now that I have Beth with me, Beth is perfect partner for election night. It's one of the reasons why Beth makes sense in so many places, because she can do all these different things. I mean, she used to host Flashpoint on WCNC. So, when she joined me, we knew that one of the many reasons why it was a good idea is because she can slide in and do election night with me. And now we have, Joel Ford, who's joined us, and Joel, that door was opened by Beth. Kenny, of course, has been with us for a long time and kind of lasted through different incarnations. But this election team we have now, Beth and me, and then Kenny, and then Joel, and then now we have you and Mark and Scott. Scott was supposed to be here tonight, and I'm sorry that he wasn't able to, but there'll be a chance in the future. But Scott, we know Scott because of you. And we should probably point that out. If people don't know, we've talked a lot about people that I've sort of introduced to the station or to each other, but Scott was a Brett Jensen special.
Yeah, so Scott was a sports reporter like I was. I was a sports writer for 20-something years. And Scott was a sports writer as well. He worked at Golf Magazine for 7 years, and he was a columnist at the Winston-Salem Journal. And we used to sit next to each other covering the Carolina Panthers. We sat next to each other in the press box because they have assigned seats. And we were next to each other for a long time. And then when all newspapers died, inevitably like the Winston-Salem Journal did, he became, much like yours truly, a sports talk radio guy up in Greensboro. And then he was in Charleston. But when he was in Greensboro and then even in Charleston, he would have me on doing his sports show to talk about the Panthers or Hornets or whatever. And then he was looking to get to Charlotte, and it was at the exact same time we had a job opening, and it just sort of the timing sort of worked perfectly. And I tell the people this all the time, Bo. I say, I even told someone again today, people have a hard time, understanding this, considering what I do now in the world of politics. But when I joined WBT 5 years and 1 month ago, there were 4 people in the world of politics that I knew. I knew who Donald Trump was, obviously. Always voted in the presidential election. I knew who Mike Pence was. I knew who Roy Cooper was. And I'd sort of heard the name Vi Lyles. I did not know who our 2 senators were. I did not know who my congressman was. I had never heard the name Tom Tillis. I had never heard that name in my entire life. And people go, oh, well, so-and-so with the school board. I'm like, you honestly think I'm going to know somebody on the school board? Really? Like, I don't even know who the senators are. And you think I'm going to know somebody's name on the school board, especially when I don't even have children or city council or county commissioners? And now I have all their cell phones, and we can all text back and forth now. So here we've come a long way in 5 years.
Well, we have come a long way. And look, I don't want to say this when I say this, it does not take anything away from when the station turned 100 years old a few years ago. One of the things that I said was, WBT is old enough that it has multiple golden eras, right? I mean, you can go back over 100 years, and I mean, there are 2 or 3 that happened before you and I were born. And people can talk about growing up and listen to this station, and that's what kind of makes it unique, is so many people have such vivid and rich memories of listening to it. But when I first started working here, I got hired in what I think was a golden age, where you had Russell and Flynn, and you had H.A. Thompson, and you had Mike Collins in the afternoon, and Henry at night, and who am I leaving out? Tom Desio and Rock and Ray. And so, I mean, just if you go back and down the hall at the station and look at the wall, a lot of those names I just mentioned are they're Hall of Famers. And then you could go 20, 30 years before that and find another golden era of people like Ty Boyd and Grady Cole and Clyde McLean and Alan Newcomb. And I feel like now we're in another, I'm not going to go out and say golden yet, because that's for historians, right? But I feel like we're in a era right now with this group, and you and I have sort of watched it be built, right? We've seen over about the last 10 years get to a point now, and we always wondered what would happen with Rush Limbaugh. Well, Pete Callender has carved out his lane, and somebody just said Pete's great on state politics. Pete's brilliant, man. I mean, and you know this, you've watched him operate. Pete does his thing in a way that only Pete does on the station. Brett Winterble, worked with Rush Limbaugh. I mean, Brett's got a national following, and Brett is one of the best foreign policy scholars that I've ever known. I mean, that's just one of his gears that he can go into in the world of politics. But, what I love about you, and now Scott is kind of your wingman, is in some ways the people that in some days in the early parts of you being a reporter, the fact that you didn't know what you didn't know helped you, I think, because you didn't have these preconceived notions about people and you weren't afraid to get in people's faces. And we have a newsroom of sort of traditional broadcasters like Garrison and Jeff Atkinson, and in the early days, John Stokes and Jim Barrell. But every news team worth its salt, to me, needs the anchors and the tried and true reporters, and they need the guys that aren't afraid to get out there and and make people uncomfortable a little bit. And that's something that you've carved out in a very unique way. And Scott is sort of cut from the same mold. And we need the combination of all of those. Really, I haven't seen our news team this stout in a long time. And like I said, that doesn't mean that I can't name other eras where it was just as good, but I'm proud to be at the station when we're doing things we're doing right now, because that newsroom, I mean, and guys like Brandon Dixon and Anna, I mean, some great new young anchors. It's a cool time to be a part of this mix, I think.
And my whole philosophy about, you talk about getting people's faces or whatever. Here's my philosophy, and it drives me nuts. It used to be that way with sports too. And people would go, like, actual TV reporters would go up to me and say, Brett, ask this question. Brett, ask that question, to a coach or to a player. And I'm like, well, you've got a microphone and you got a vocal cords that work. Why do I always have to be the bad guy? But my theory was with sports was, as a college coach or a pro coach, you're getting paid $5-6 million a year. You can answer a question. You don't work for the CIA. It's a stupid game. Like, I love football, but at the end of the day, it's just a game. And when I switched over to politics, politicians and coaches and agents are the exact same personality types, the exact same person. And they're always trying to hide secrets or whatever and give non-answer answers. And my whole theory with politicians which would annoy me. And that's why, like I famously went after Dan McCready 2 or 3 times, because he would give non-answers, and it would infuriate me, because I'm like, wait a minute. No one forced you to run for office. You did this on your own. And if you actually want to represent the people, you can answer a stupid question. And no one's forcing you. No one forced you to run for office. And if you're running, and even if you're running for state representative, you're making $13,000 a year. So you're not doing it for the money. So you're either doing it for ego or something else. And it's probably ego. So if you're choosing to run for office, you can answer a question. And when someone doesn't answer my question or they pivot, I immediately go, thank you, or that's great. That's not what I asked you. What I asked you was this. I don't care about what you just said. This is what I asked you. And that's why I do that, because I feel like they owe it to the public to give an answer. And to give a non-answer answer, nothing infuriates me more, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or independent. And so I just don't have time for that. And so that's why I always will repeat the question again. Like that one time with Dan McCready, I asked the same question 5 straight times.
Right.
5 straight times. It's like,
well, and so Jim says, Pete's great on state politics. Yes. I say, and this is no secret, Brett Winterble is unbelievable on the national politics. Jim says Brett is great on the local politics, and he's right. I mean, you have carved out a niche in the local. You mentioned Dan McCready, and that was one of the campaigns where I thought you really started putting yourself on the map. And another one, I'll never forget the first time Rhonda Cheek met you. It was at a school board meeting, and Rhonda's been on my show for many, many years as an analyst, and in recent years with Beth and me, and now she's off the school board, so we don't hear from her as much. But I remember that when Rhonda was a school board member, and it was the first school board meeting that you ever went to where she was there, and they were doing a media session at the end, and I guess they had a way that they usually did it, and then you sort of walked up and you wanted to ask 3 or 4 more questions. And I remember Rhonda saying to me, who is this Brett Jensen? and I remember the first time you encountered her, I guess she wasn't used to your style, and she was not happy about how it went down. And then over the years, I think she came to realize that you were an important part of the mix because you were not afraid to ask questions that weren't the run-of-the-mill questions. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Rhonda came. I know this, but I mean, you would say the same thing, that Rhonda and you came to have a very, very respectful relationship. And she was somebody that actually would tell you things that sometimes she wouldn't tell anybody else because she trusted you, and she saw over time that, you know, your heart was in the place of finding the answers that sometimes your run-of-the-mill reporter would stop after question one. And, you know, when you're on the receiving end of that, and, you know, Elise Deschutes comes to mind and Ernest Winston comes to mind, you know, and you were relentless with them sometimes, like following them onto an elevator and making them answer the question. You know, I think, you know, a lot of time if you're a public figure, you come across somebody like the way Jensen operates, it's a jolt to the system to begin with, but over time, it becomes a real respectful relationship because they know that you are not going to take any you know what, and you're going to get to the bottom of the question you want answered respectfully, but also not giving up.
But I also don't think I'm unfair, and I don't think I take cheap shots. And they
No,
may
no, and
not
I
like.
didn't say that.
Right. No. I know. No. I'm not saying you did. And so they initially may not like me. Believe me, there were so many people on that CMS school board that for a long time would have hired a hitman if they could have. But it's they also know that I'm fair and that I'm not gonna like jump out of bushes to try and do gotcha moments or anything like that. Like, that's just not my style, and I'll just walk straight up to you with my phone recording, and that's just the way I've always been. I don't need to do like gotcha or whatever, but you know, if you mess up or you do something, I'm going to be there to call you out. And but also if you do something really good, I'm going to be there and give you praise. You know, and Ernest Winston, I said this all the time. Like, you want Ernest Winston as your neighbor, but you didn't want him as your superintendent. And you know, and Ernest and I said, I even told him, I said, Ernest, you have to understand, this isn't personal. I said, I actually like you as a person. This isn't personal. It's to the old Godfather situation. It's just business. It's just business. And he understood that. And, you know, so he and I, you know, and Vi Lyle's the same way. I think Vi respects me. There are some people on that city council who did not, but that's fine. Like, whatever. I don't get caught up in that. I don't care if politicians like me. I didn't care if athletes or coaches like me. I just it makes your job easier if they do. But at the same point, I generally don't care one way or the other if they like me or not. I generally don't. And I think that's a big difference between me and a lot of other people. And I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but some people want to be friends with the athletes, and some people want to be friends with the politicians. I honestly don't care. I honestly don't care. And that's, you know, and that's the way I've always approached it. And I don't know, it's just everyone has their own style, and my style is, I'm just going to ask you, and Bo knows this better than anyone on the planet, how I don't have the filter, and I wish I did. I don't know how to sugarcoat things. I wish I did. I just say things bluntly, and Bo will go, well, you're not going to say it that way on air, are you? I'm like, well, I'll try and figure out a way to say it politely.
Or we'll be on the air and I'll look at you and I say, do you realize what you just said?
I know. For better or for worse. Yeah.
Let's see. Who's doing Talktoberfest on Wednesday? That would be Brett Winterble and Coach Doherty.
Oh, okay.
That's going to be fun. And then a week from, is that right? A week from tonight? Yeah, right. Yeah. A week from tonight is Halloween Eve. And that'll be Sharon Thorsland, Anna Erickson, Pam Warner, and Beth Troutman. I think I've heard of that last one, Beth Troutman. She's pretty good. Now, the ladies of WBT will be on the 30th, so there are 2 more episodes after this one. And again, if you're tuning in tonight or joining us, expecting Scott Hamilton, he was supposed to be here, but he called in this afternoon and not feeling well. So I came out of the bullpen, and always good to hang out with my buddy Brett Jensen.
Bring in the righty.
And by the way, thanks to Dry Otter Waterproofing, who they've been our sponsor all month here. Every Monday and Wednesday, 7 o'clock on Facebook Live. Let's see, we're going to start the descent here because one of us has to get up and do a morning show, and then the other one has to be a guest on said morning show in the final hour. So
I actually have to set my alarm for tomorrow morning.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, my alarm goes off at 7:55 on Tuesdays.
Yeah, I say whatever I need to say about you by 7:30, so that way you won't hear it.
Fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Let's see. Let me get a few more of these in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you ever get to ask Mandy Cohen a question in a press conference?
No, I never did. I never got to ask her. Never, ever, ever in 14 months got to ask her a single question. Not one.
Are you surprised that she's where she is now, the head of the CDC?
No, because at the time there was talks that she was going to be put in charge of the I don't know what's the department up there, like the health department or Department
Health and
of
Human Services.
Yeah, up in D.C., part of Biden's cabinet. That
Yeah.
was the rumors that she was going to be part of Biden's cabinet because Mandy Cohen was basically helped put Obamacare together under Barack Obama in his White House, and so that was the word that she was going to be put forth on that in his cabinet. And so the fact that she's the CDC, and that doesn't surprise me that much, to be honest with you. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, you can take it with a grain of salt, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me.
Well, I can't see how many people have joined us on here, but Bernie has texted me and said we've had well over 50 at a couple of points. So that's pretty good participation, and we appreciate the fact that all of you would spend any part of your evening just hanging out with us. Hey, Bernie, can you pop up on the screen? Is that possible? Bernie Bowles, our producer in the morning. Eric, here he comes. Here he comes.
Hey guys.
I want to do this. I see a square, but no.
I see. Yeah, I see a black screen.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't see.
How about now?
No, just a black screen. Well, we can hear you, and I just if we can't see you, we can hear you. I just want to take an opportunity to say that you have. There he goes. You've engineered every single one of these, and we still have 2 left. And you work with us in the morning and throughout the day, and here you are at every one of these. I just want to say thanks, and you've done a great job, and you probably don't get the due you deserve, but we appreciate you, man.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and it's just great to be a part of it, and I love interacting with all the listeners and the people commenting. So hope I get enough questions on the screen, and it's just a lot of fun. Really enjoy it.
Well, Bernie, I tell Bernie this often, and I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse, but I said you remind me a lot of myself when I was your age, because you're just trying to soak in as much as you can and learn the business and do things like this. And I remember feeling the same way. I'm in this building and I'm working for this legendary station. I want to do more. I want to be part. I want to make a difference. And you've done that in a big way in a short amount of time. And we love you in the morning. But I just wanted everybody to know that this is the guy behind the scenes that's making this possible tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. Y'all did a great job.
And Bernie probably is ready for us to wrap it up here, Jensen. So this is like the pregame show for what we'll do more of on the air tomorrow. And Beth will join us. And we almost got Beth to join us for this tonight, but then I think she realized that she didn't want to she didn't want to put makeup on for tonight. She's ready to go to bed, and also, which I can understand, but also that would have been 3 for her. So we gotta preserve Beth. And Beth will be back with us tomorrow morning. So
right. Oh, by the way, let me give a quick programming note if I could, Bo. On Wednesday night on my show, Talk Bakari will be in studio with me for a full hour.
Well, and look, man, that is that's outside of the school board, and I know that you've been covering some of the local races outside of Charlotte, but I mean, in Greater Charlotte Metro, the school board and this D6 rematch between Stephanie Hand and Tark Bakari. To me, those are the must-see races, because city council at large, we know who's going to be there. It's just a matter of what the order is going to be, essentially. And a lot of these other races, they were decided in the early going, so there's not as much at stake. The mayor's race, there's no surprise there. So let's end on that, because I'm curious. You have Tark on Wednesday night. Who do you think is going to win that race?
I don't know. He won like by 350 votes or something like that a year and a half ago over Stephanie. And she jumped out to the big lead after the early votes were tabulated, or the early voting and the absentee voting. And he kept slowly making his way back. And it's going to be a battle. It's going to be, I don't know. It's honestly, at this point, it's probably a coin flip, just like the last one was, where he won by 350 votes. And so he's having to work as hard, if not harder, than he's ever had to work before to win an election. And so we'll see what happens. But it's also just keep this in mind. If the current Senate maps or the state Senate maps stay true to form with the new districts, don't be surprised if he sees that and maybe goes in that direction.
Well, I fully expect him. It's just my opinion, but I fully expect Tark to run for Congress or state office or something beyond Charlotte at some point. I fully expect Tricia to run for something bigger. I fully expect. I believe Jeff Jackson's getting set to turn around and run for something else.
Attorney General.
Yeah, I mean, you got Dan Bishop running there. You know, Bill Graham just got in the governor's race the other day, so that's gotten interesting with the amount of money that he's spending out of his own pocket. And yeah, that's the same Bill Graham that has been on our show up until recently. So there's some intrigue out there. You got to hunt for it a little more than you normally do, but that's going to be must listen radio on Wednesday night with Tark, as will be 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. tomorrow when Jensen joins us in the studio. And I saw what Jim said, last Republican standing. Well, if Tark loses, you still have Ed Driggs in district number 7 because he was unopposed. So technically, there will be one Republican left, but not many. I mean, we see the way that it's going, and it's a different time than it was when Pat McCrory was elected 7 straight terms. And, I often pick his brain about that when he comes in with me on Wednesdays, just going, did you ever foresee it going this direction this fast? And I don't. I think Pat's pretty good at analyzing the ups and downs and twists and turns, but I think even he would have said, wow, that was, Pat McCrory was the last of an era. I mean, especially as, a mayor. I don't know when there could ever be a GOP mayor again, maybe ever. I don't know.
No,
so Ann says best to your mom, Brett. And
thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll leave it on that. And so, hey, first of all, thanks for allowing me to pinch hit tonight for Scott Hamilton. Hopefully in the next cycle of these, you'll get to know Scott a little bit better. Luckily, Jensen introduced us all to Scott, and he's been a great addition. And it's been fun hanging out with you, man. You're one of my buddies and my longtime friends in the business. And like you said at the beginning, it's like, this has kind of been like you and me sitting down to our monthly lunch with a studio audience or something.
That's exactly right. And don't worry, Bo. I'll see you at 9:04 and 30 seconds tomorrow.
And not a second earlier. Thanks to Dry Otter Waterproofing. Thanks to Bernie Bowles. Thanks to Mike Schaefer and my buddy Brett Jensen here. And I'll be starting bright and early with my regular partner Beth Troutman. And we'll talk to you next time. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.
See you guys. Thanks.